Okay. So anyway, we're here with Dick Jerardi. Is it DJ still? Is that what they still call you in Philly?
That's perfectly fine.
So anyway, Dick, I really appreciate you doing this. I've followed your stuff since I was little. I'm 35 years old now, so I'm probably right. Not when you first got to the Daily News, but when there was good stuff happening, the St. Joe's run, and I know you covered that. I think that Villanova championship game. I read you were there, right?
Yeah, you weren't born when I first started the Daily News. So, I started in '85, but yeah, no, you're certainly talking about some of the heydays, the St. Joe's from '04, and then of course the Chris Jenkins shot in 2016. Yeah, I was maybe 20 feet from him when he launched it.
Yeah, I read that. I was reading a little bit about that last night. But I always looked up to you. I always appreciated your stuff, and that's not easy for me. I'm not always impressed with everybody I read. So I always really appreciate to hear your opinion. So I appreciate this one. I had Billy Hahn on a couple of weeks ago, former LaSalle coach and West Virginia coach, and we were talking about, we actually did this before the tournament. And when I started to think of Final Four, I was like, who can I have on for the Final Four? And you were the first guy that came to my mind. And so when I reached out to Billy, he said, hey, I think he'll do it. And so I really appreciate it. I know you're probably.
No, I did. I covered 25 of them, and I've seen 27. So yeah.
So who better to talk to, right? And I read
it's a great event.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I guess before we get into that, if we could just get a little bit, it's something I was interested in thinking about you the last day or two. I know from what we talked before, you're from Baltimore, right? And
correct.
Is that kind of where things took off for you as far as writing for sports, or were you into something else there and then ended up with Philly? Did you fall into that?
Yeah, like Billy, I'm a University of Maryland graduate. I was there just a little bit before he was. So we kind of met each other later in life when he became a coach. And then, of course, when he started coming up here and coaching LaSalle. So I was a journalism major, but I spent a lot of time after I got out of college at racetracks. That was kind of my passion. I was driving a cab and going to the track, and then I started to have a family, and it gets to the point where I said, I probably need to get a serious job here. So I work for a paper in Baltimore, and then I worked for a little paper called Sports First, which is an all sports paper. 1984. The paper only lasted a year, but it was great training ground, and that got me noticed. I had some friends at the Daily News in Philly. They were actually looking to hire a horse racing writer. That's when I started at the paper. It was actually February of 1985. And then the college basketball started a couple of years later.
And it was, I actually read this because I think it was maybe the last article you wrote where you said you got hired to cover, was it Garden State Park? And it
correct.
Was the night Villanova won the championship.
Yeah, I think there was something in the air about that, right? I'm watching this game. It's opening night of the racetrack, and it's like this one of the great games, obviously, in Philadelphia college basketball history. And it was barely, not even 2 seasons later, I was out covering the beginning of the great Lionel Simmons LaSalle teams when he was a freshman. I covered them all the way through their NIT run. They ended up in the NIT finals. So yeah, it wasn't my intention when I went to the paper. I was strictly hired as a horse racing guy, but I raised my hand and said, look, I followed college basketball. If you want to send me. And the first game they ever sent me to was my man, Coach Chaney at McGonigal Hall, Temple versus Rutgers. And then I jumped on that LaSalle run in 1987.
And then you're there 33 years, right?
Correct.
And I was thinking about this earlier, you were, I guess, a little fortunate because at the time, most of your time there, I guess at the end it changed, but there wasn't a ton of social media, right? People weren't getting their sports information the way they do today, where they're all on the iPhone. Yeah. And so you guys were like you guys were the talk of the town as far as sports. I remember being young where it was, did you read Rich Hoffman's column? Did you read Dick Jerardi's column? And so that's where, I remember my dad or my grandfather was like Daily News every day, and I still know some older guys like that. It's funny, but so for the 33 years there, was there ever a moment where, I'm sure it was so much fun, but was there ever a moment where you maybe were thinking of transitioning into something different or leaving at one point, or was it just kind of, hey, this is my future?
Yeah, only at the very end when it was starting to change. Actually had changed. We were kind of one of the last papers that did change. But yeah, I was incredibly fortunate to be where I was at the time I was. because we were it, man. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
when I first got to town, reading the sports section. Of course, it's back to front, and it would be 40, 50 pages of sports every day.
Yeah.
One great writer after another. And I was just blown away because, I mean, I grew up in Baltimore, and there was sports, but it was nothing like this.
Mm-mm.
There was the passion wasn't the same, the quality of the writing wasn't the same. So, yeah, to work for great people like Mike Rathod, who was our executive sports editor, Caesar Alsop, who was actually a great friend in college, Pat McClune, Brian Tolan, Josh Barnett. We just had Chuck Bousman. We just had one great sports editor after another. The other writers, the editors at the paper, and the fact that we just got to go to cover everything. I mean, there was nothing we didn't get to cover because we were it. There was no other competition.
Yeah.
And we had the benefit of the late deadlines where we could get the story behind the story. We weren't just regurgitating what happened in the game. We were trying to tell you something you didn't know. And we actually had the time to do it. So yeah, to be able to cover the two sports I liked the most, horse racing and college basketball, was a total joy. I did 31 straight Kentucky Derbies from 1987 to 2017 for the paper, and 25 Final Fours, and got to cover just, I mean, great players, great teams, the great LaSalle teams in the late 80s, early 90s, the St. Joe's team with Nelson and West, and the Villanova team that won the championship, getting to know just legendary people like John Chaney, is still my favorite person ever to deal with. He was such a great character and just such a wonderful person. But just some of the players like Mike Breeswick, who's still a good friend today, who played on the great Temple team of the late 80s, Lionel Simmons, Jameer Nelson. I mean, just guys that were as good as it gets anywhere, not just in the city.
And then you did, I think, I don't know if I read this right, because I guess, how does it work? So you're covering, let's say, St. Joe's and horse racing, but then did you do like the 01 Sixers finals run you were allowed to do, and the 08 Phillies?
I did. I was, it was interesting. I was actually in California for the Breeders' Cup as the Phillies were getting into that 08 World Series where they finally won it. And I had done some of the playoff series leading up to that. And then I was covering the horses, but I came back, I want to say Sunday from LA, and came home and then drove down for game 4 maybe. And then I'm losing track of the time. And then game 5 was the game that got rain delayed for like 2 days.
Yeah.
So I was there for that. And then I was there for the final 3 innings when the Phillies won it. And yes, I was there for the Sixers' great run in 01. I actually would cover the visiting teams or the opponents. And it was great stuff because NBA guys are fascinating because they really don't care what they say. They're like, and they're not guarded like a lot of college players are. And I remember Glenn Robinson was just a wild man for the Bucks. And Charles Oakley played for the Raptors. I think the Sixers played in I want to say the second series.
It's the second round. Yep. Game 7, when Vince Carter misses that shot.
Right. Missed the shot. So at one point, Iverson gets like, I don't know, 50. And I went in the locker rooms and said, what'd you think about that? He says, well, he won't get 50 again. Well, he had 55 the next day. But it was just great. And the Bucks were great in the Eastern Conference Final because Ray Allen was on that team and Glenn Robinson. So they had some really good players.
They were really good.
Coach. And George Karl was great because he understood how to use the media. They practiced at the Palestra, and he wanted to get something across to the officials. So I introduced myself, and he realized immediately he needed to talk to me in the Philly papers. And it was just funny to watch how savvy these guys are about how our business works.
It seems like the NBA game especially has changed so much too. Like I was 14, 15 at the time. That Sixers team was probably my most memorable Sixers team of my lifetime. It was so fun to watch. I mean, when you're a kid and you see the things that Iverson was doing, but I was talking to somebody about this the other day, like every team seemed to have, besides the Lakers, everybody had one superstar, Vince Carter, Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce. And then nobody was switching teams and nobody was upset. So I don't want to play anymore. Everybody played every night.
Sure.
And it's just now it's totally watered down, in a way. It's like as soon as you don't feel a little good or they don't want to play back to backs. And it's just, it's a shame because I think the NBA was so special at one point. If you think back when Shaq left, he went through those tough periods they had some down years and then he battles back to win 2 more. But nobody wants to do that anymore. So I don't know. I just think there was something special about that.
Yeah, kind of LeBron changed everything, right? When he went to Miami, he never had enough good players in Cleveland to win. So he just got frustrated. He says, that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
My buddies in Miami. And of course they're in the finals 4 straight years. But yeah, no, you're right. It has changed. That Sixers run for me, and I think for the city, nothing will ever obviously top the Eagles Super Bowl. That's the biggest sports event in the history of the city. I was gone by then. I actually had left a couple of months before. I probably would have been in Minneapolis, but that's okay. I got to see enough great things myself. But I think that Sixers run galvanized the city because unlike the Eagles Super Bowl thing, this happened over months.
Yeah,
it just got
that's true.
One series and the next series, and really the whole season, where they had a season nobody expected, and then in mid-season, Theo Ratliff gets hurt, and they bring in Mutombo. I've always contended if Ratliff hadn't gotten hurt, I think they were a better team with him than with Mutombo.
More athletic.
Never to be proved.
Yeah.
But I thought that team for the first half of the season, if they had been able to get to the playoffs healthy with that group, I think they actually could have beaten the Lakers.
They started 10-0, remember? And another guy that got hurt in that series, or the Raptor series, who they missed, was George Lynch.
Sure.
He guarded Kobe a little bit.
Yeah, and Aaron McKee was playing on half a leg by the end. I mean, they were so beat up by the end. And look, the Lakers were a great team anyway. They might not have beaten them under any circumstance, but under those circumstances, it was amazing how close all the games were.
Yeah.
I mean, they were in all the games. They had opportunities to win.
Game 2 won.
Yeah,
they're going back to Philly up 2-0.
Up 2-0. So yeah, it was that close. But yeah,
besides that finals run, were you around that team much at all, or just kind of?
I really wasn't. Phil Jasner was our great beat writer. Yeah. In my opinion, the greatest beat writer in my time in the city for any sport.
Him and Iverson got into that and during that practice thing a little bit. It was always funny. Yeah.
But Alan had a lot of respect for Phil because Phil worked so hard. And Phil sadly passed away about a decade or so ago, but he was the best. He was the model for how to do it. But yeah, no, that was Phil's squad. They brought the rest of us in just for the playoffs. Yeah. He didn't need any help during the regular season.
Yeah, that was a fun team. So I guess we'll transition into, I think, like I said from the beginning, to me, if I'm going to talk Final Four with anybody, you're as good as anybody to talk to. So a couple days away, Saturday, right? We got the Final Four games. I guess we'll start with, is this what you kind of expected? Or is there anyone in here? Did Villanova overperform? Is there any of these 4 teams that you're kind of surprised? I mean, I guess North Carolina at one point, I thought in the season, they might not even make the tournament.
Right.
Is there anything surprising to you, or just kind of, hey, this is to be expected?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not like when you're talking, 4 of the top 8 programs in the country, right? I mean, there's no arguing that North Carolina, Duke, Kansas, and Villanova, whatever order you want to put them in, are somewhere in the top 8 to 10 programs. So from that standpoint, you're not surprised. North Carolina a month ago was dreadful. I mean, like you said, they weren't going to make the tournament. They lost at home to Pitt. I mean, they were brutal, and they got bombed. But something clicked, and it's not like they just got good when the tournament started. They had been playing good for weeks, and I think you could make a case that nobody has played better in the tournament than North Carolina. They had 10
I agree.
bad minutes, right? At the end against Baylor, where I don't know what was going on, but really all they had to do was dribble the ball up and throw it out of bounds every play, and they would have won by 10, but they kept turning it over, just doing stupid stuff. But they played great. So I think they have a legitimate chance to win. And obviously the fact that they're playing Duke for the first time in NCAA tournament history, in the semifinals in New Orleans, and with all the other stuff going around Coach K. And whenever he loses again, if he loses, or whenever, if he gets to Monday night in his last game, the subplots are all over the place.
Yeah, you couldn't have scripted it better that those two were going to play. I think 2 things about Carolina. One was, if you remember, there was a game late in the season. They get blown out by Pitt. They get blown out by Miami.
Yep.
They're down 1, I think, with 10 seconds to Syracuse. They pull that game out. And I don't know if that kind of flipped a switch on them, but at one point it was like, like you said, I didn't know if they were going to make the tournament. I think I agree with you. They're playing as good as anybody. But one thing I wonder is because, and I'm curious your opinion on this, because of the quick turnaround that you have to play the championship Monday.
Mm-hmm.
And the build up this week with Coach K and Duke Carolina, and they just beat Coach K on his home court in his last game. For kids to have that much adrenaline going into this game and all the hype, do you see that? I wonder, is that going to be tough for them to then turn around and play maybe a Kansas with not even 48 hours later?
Yeah, it's funny. It's a lesson I learned pretty early in covering Final Fours. 3 hours matters that weekend. Yeah. You'd rather play the first game Saturday than the second game. And the most famous example was 1999. Duke had one of their greatest teams, Elton Brand, Shane Battier, that group. I mean, they had lost one game all season. And they played the second game on Saturday after UConn had beaten Ohio State. And Michigan, it was the first really good Michigan State team with Izzo. And they were tough and they beat you up. Duke won, but you could watch them. They were getting a little tired at the end of the game. And I'd gone to St. Petersburg thinking that UConn had a real chance to beat them anyway, because UConn had lost twice. In fact, UConn was the last team to lose that season. They were really good. Richard Hamilton, and Khalid Al-Amin. I mean, a really good team. And in the paper on Monday, I picked UConn to win the game, and Duke was like a 10-point favorite and unbeatable. There's no way anybody could beat them. And I understood all the elements. My horse racing background helped me a little bit because you understand how much time matters in between races, in between games. So, yeah, to your point, I think the winner of Duke Carolina is at a disadvantage on Monday, regardless of who they play. The likelihood it would be Kansas. I'm not selling Villanova short because you can't, even though they're now short they have a short rotation and now they're short one of their best players. But yeah, I think keep a close eye on whoever wins the game Saturday, see how hard it is on that team. And it may not be easy for them to come back Monday night.
That was my next question. So Villanova, I'll be honest, I think this is maybe Jay Wright's best coaching job as far as the talent that he has. Not that they're not talented, but I was just talking to Billy about this before the tournament, and he said he thinks you have to have maybe 3 NBA players to win this thing. And I don't know if that's true or not, and I'll be curious to hear your opinion, but they don't have a lottery pick, Villanova probably. And I think the system's incredible. The way that he gets all 5 guys to play in the post. Can they win without Justin Moore?
They can win. The style of play gives them an opportunity. I mean, the possessions in the Houston game, it was 55. That's a number you just don't see in college basketball. But that's kind of how they want to play. And in this circumstance, how they have to play. They basically they had 6 players they were using. Now they're down to 5. And obviously they'll use somebody off the bench. So, but look, if they don't get in foul trouble, they control the pace of the game, which they will. They'll run every possession 25 to 30 seconds. Make Kansas play defense. Don't take bad shots, which they don't do. And that's bad mistakes. Shots. Lead to fast breaks, and that's why Kansas ran Miami out of the gym on Sunday. And make a decent percentage of threes. They're going to have an opportunity just because of the style. Nobody plays like them. If you think back 4 years ago to when they had their best team, I mean, they ran Kansas out of the gym, but they can't do that now. For the point you made, they don't have NBA players. There's no Mikal Bridges or Jalen Brown or that crowd. I mean, they had 4 guys drafted, 3 in the first round. Steven Kenzo, they don't have those players now. So yeah, you're right.
Would you agree with Billy's point about needing the NBA players to win?
Historically, that's a fact. Yeah, that is a fact. This is a little different because of the COVID year. So you get guys like Colin Gillespie's not supposed to be playing college basketball, right? Samuels isn't. Think about all the experience these guys. So that kind of makes up for some of the typical thing when you only get to play 4. So this has been a different kind of college basketball season. It is interesting that Duke, I mean, they have so many talented players that they're getting there with the younger guys because that's kind of how they recruit. But their younger guys are obviously very talented. But yeah, I do give them an opportunity. I just think it would be so hard for them to do it twice with such a short rotation. I think they have a better chance in the first game than the second game. But Kansas is really good. I mean, they got 7 or 8 guys that are solid. They're big, they're fast. They run some good half-court stuff. The whole key is just get the game to the last 8 minutes and have it be a 2, 3, 4-point game. Your team doesn't miss free throws. All the pressure will be on them, and then you take your chances.
Yeah, it is interesting. And every year I get surprised by it, how bad college players are from the free throw line.
It's amazing, right?
If you make foul shots, you're most likely in every game. And it's interesting.
Villanova's setting an all-time record for highest free throw percentage. I mean, did they miss it all Saturday? I don't think they missed it all. In a game where any miss was a problem. In a low-scoring game like 50-44. Actually, said somebody before the game, I said first team to 60 wins. It was just so low scoring. I didn't anticipate Houston was going to shoot 1 for 20 from 3.
Well,
if they can beat Houston, they can beat anybody, because I thought Houston's metrics coming into that game were as good as anybody.
I thought they were so I'm like, this team is unbelievably athletic. They're tough.
Yeah, but they negated him by their floor spacing on offense. It's really hard. They did something you don't see teams do anymore. Everybody loves to run all these ball screens where they bring the defender into it. Well, Houston just knocks them out, blows them up, just kills them. So what did Villanova? They just never ran any screens. They just ISO'd guys, and as you said, got into the post, pivoted 47 times, then threw the ball to somebody for an open shot, and nobody plays remotely like that. So how do you prepare for that in a couple of things?
It's unbelievable to watch Gillespie go into the post and run point from the post.
Yes.
Finding open guys, he's finding cutters.
Yeah.
And I'm watching, you're right. How do you prepare to defend against? You don't have to defend against that all year.
Yeah. And you know what it does too? It almost negates offensive fouls. When's the last time you saw Villanova play?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
They come in under such control. You watch all these other guys, they come flying in there and run over guys. And of course, in college basketball, if you touch somebody, it's a charge. It's wrong. I mean, I could go on a 10-minute rant about too many offensive foul calls, but they figured out a way to negate that problem. And offensive fouls are among the biggest momentum changers in college basketball, because maybe your guy just scored, but like it doesn't count. They wipe it out and everybody's going nuts. And the referee loves to demonstrate. It's been the biggest problem in the sport forever. I wish they'd get rid of it, call it like they do in the NBA. And 90%.
The refs anticipate it before they even realize what's happening.
That's right. And guys fall down, fake getting fouled. Then there's a couple rule changes I would have. I know they now have this where they say it's a warning for flopping. No warning. Technical foul, first flop. That'll stop.
That's a good rule.
In the NBA, that they don't tolerate this nonsense. It's stupid.
Yeah. Do you think? I was talking to a guy at work about this. Do you think Colin Gillespie is the best true point guard, right? Like that was in this tournament.
I can't say, because I don't remember all 68 teams.
Well, how about that's left?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there's no question.
Does so much for them. He does the rebounds.
Right. He's a throwback. He understands. He's like a coach. He understands time and score, situations, when to go, when not to go. And of all the Villanova players, I think he'll have the best shot at the NBA because he has a skill that is so valued. He makes open 3-point shots. In the NBA these days, that is a skill. Love. And I think when you see a guy like Jalen Brunson, who was the player of the year, wasn't drafted till the second round and is having a really good NBA career as a free agent, going to make a lot of money. I think when scouts look at players in Villanova now, they upgrade them. They think, hey, they're better than we even think they are. I don't know if any of them are going to get drafted, but any of them that want to play in the league, they'll get an opportunity with the team because of the coaching and because of the recent history of how much success the players coming out of the program are having.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because, you look at Archie, I think he's on the Knicks, and DiVincenzo, similar type players.
Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges is one of the best players in the league.
Sixers did a good job with that one.
That might, of all the dumb things they did during the whole mess. That would be right up there with the Fultz. All right,
Yeah. So let's
let's
trade
move
up
up to
two
get
spots.
Fultz. And by the way, give the Celtics an extra pick so they can take Jason Tatum.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they actually have Bridges and trade him for Zaire Smith.
Might be defensive player of the year this year, Mikal Bridges.
It was so obvious to me that he was an NBA star. I thought he always had the highest NBA potential of any of Jay's players, and it's playing out that way.
Yeah. So last thing on Nova. So you're there when Jay gets hired. When did Jay get hired? 01?
Yes. Yeah.
So when he gets hired, because I don't remember at the time, but were you was he someone, I guess what I would ask is, are you surprised by his success, or like, could you see him winning national championships like this?
Not. In fact, I was the beat writer at Villanova when he got hired. I covered them from, I want to say like 95, 96 to 2000, 2001 when Steve Lapis was the coach. And they had some really good teams. I mean, Kerry Kittles, they were regularly in the top 5 in the country. They could never get far in the tournament. I don't think they ever made the Sweet 16. And then it was starting to slip a little bit. And then all of a sudden one weekend, it was a crazy weekend. Speedy Morris was out at LaSalle. The Drexel coach, Steve Seymour, was fired. And then all of a sudden Steve is leaving to go to UMass, and they got to hire a coach. And Jay Wright was a very hot coach at Hofstra. He'd done really well with Speedy Claxton. Rutgers was offering him a contract, but that wasn't his dream job. His dream job was to come home. He's a Bucks County guy. He went to Council Rock and then went to Bucknell. Villanova was his dream job. That was his school. And then out of nowhere, they hired him. And look, I thought he had a chance to do okay. But frankly, I thought the days of the small Catholic school being a national power were over. Yeah. Because really, since Villanova had won in 85, there were only a few of those Catholic schools that even made the Final Four. Forget winning a national championship, because the state schools got into it. The money got bigger. I mean, imagine back in the day, a school like Florida winning 2 national titles. They didn't care about basketball, but they cared because there was money. So I didn't see it happening. And his first couple of years were pretty mediocre. And then all of a sudden he got the Randy Foy and Kyle Lowry, Alan Ray group. They got to the Sweet 16 and they started to be regulars in the NCAA tournament. Then he breaks through in 09. And then to get to the Final Four with a team that probably was a little more talented than this team, but not dramatically so. They were kind of overachievers as well. And then they backslid a little bit, and then they can't get out of the early rounds. And they had some really great records, and the Big East changed. I remember they went to the smaller Big East, and you're thinking, is this really going to happen? And then in 2016, it all changed, man. I mean, they played great in all 6 NCAA games. I mean, I covered 3 of them live that beat Miami in the Sweet 16. They were phenomenal. That's the moment I said, God, they can win this thing. And then, of course, they got Oklahoma in the semifinals. They lost by 23 in the regular season, beat them by 44.
I remember that game.
And then, of course, the legendary game with North Carolina and Houston. And at that point, the program had some really good records, like winning 30 a year, but bombing out early in the tournament. From that point to this point, I mean, they're 20-3 in NCAA games. I mean, it's just amazing. If you think about it. I think you can make a pretty good case. It's the best program in the country.
Wow.
And that's a tribute to the coach because they are doing it year after year. I mean, this is the 3rd time in 6 years. Now, there's been 7 seasons, but we didn't have a tournament in one of them. It's the 3rd time in 6 years they're in the Final Four.
When I was talking,
it ain't easy to do.
No, when I was just talking to Billy Hahn, he said he referred to them as guard heaven. He said if I'm a guard right now, there's nowhere else I'd rather play than with Jay Wright at Villanova. So
yeah. And look, his first great player was Speedy Claxton at Hofstra, and that's kind of how he coached. Speedy was just he played in the NBA. It was just a classic penetrate, get to the rim, or throw it out for a 3, and that's how all of Jay's teams played for years.
Yeah.
I mean, and it worked. But it didn't get him all the way to the finish line. But then he tweaked it, more emphasis on the 3. I mean, his team in 2018 set the record for most 3s that'll probably never be broken. Wow. I mean, it was insane. They busted up the old record. I mean, and they they overwhelmed teams. I'd say that's, to me, the greatest 6-game NCAA performance of the last half century. I mean, you don't beat teams in the Final Four like they pulverized Kansas and Michigan. It's not like they're beating directional schools.
Yeah.
That team would have to go down as one of the best ever in college basketball. And the 16's performance, they didn't have like the regular season the 18 team had, but they were every bit as good in the tournament. They were great too. And here's this team, which really has no business doing this.
None.
And they're doing it again. So, yeah, that's a tribute to the coach. Did I see any of it coming? No. But once it started, I'm not surprised it's sustained, and I'm not surprised they got there because he's figured it out. He's in the Hall of Fame for a reason, and just they have a way of doing this, and the kids play with such confidence. And you know what? It doesn't matter what the score is. They play the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Like when teams make these runs at them, if you look at them, you would never know they just lost 8 points off their lead.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. Then they'll just come down like a Saturday, what Houston had got within 2.
Yep.
Ball timeout, Gillespie hits it like 15-footers. Only basket of the game, but it was the most important basket of the game. Got him breathing room. Houston never had the ball with a chance to tie or take the lead.
Yeah. Do you think he stays there? Do you think he finishes his coaching career at Villanova? That's
100%.
Definitely.
Now, he had talked to me at one point. No, look, he had opportunities to go to Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not leaving to go to Kentucky, you're not leaving for another college job. So he had talked at one point to a bunch of us about maybe trying the NBA. I thought he had some real interest for him. He's had offers, but I think coaching the Olympics and coaching USA basketball, he realizes it's a very different control situation for the coach with the college players versus the pro players, where you're spending as much time talking to their agents. To your point you were making before, guys say, I don't think I'm playing tonight. I just don't think it would work for him any better than it worked for a guy like John Beilein. Look, if some great team, a ready-made team, offered him a job, he might still think about it, but he's not going to some team that just won 20 games.
No.
And why? I mean, and he's got a great gig. He's making a lot of money. And Jay himself has said this many times. He said, it's great to be a college coach in a pro town because he only gets praised. Nobody gets mad at him. What happened to the Eagles?
Right.
Kind of a great gig. You're not a coach at Indiana or Kentucky like Calipari. I'm sure they're still killing him for losing to St. Peter's. But Jay can lose to some lower seeded team. People will be mad for 48 hours, but he still gets to go to the beach in the summertime and people don't hassle him.
Yeah. And the NBA, you know how it goes. Those guys they make more than the coach. And then so as soon as there's a problem, it's on the coach. They're not getting rid of the guy that's making $50 million a year. So.
LeBron decides, this coach, I've gone about as far as I can with him. Get him out of here. And they have that kind of juice. And look, a guy like LeBron James, this being an exception, but generally whatever team he goes to is in the finals. Yeah, so why wouldn't he get it? Why wouldn't he get the same stuff?
Right. Before we I want to transition to the NBA and the Sixers a little bit, but before we do that, I guess I'll put you on the spot. So this weekend, who do you have winning? And then ultimately, who do you think wins it all?
Yeah, I think North Carolina is going to beat Duke. I think everybody's jumped on the Duke bandwagon for good reason. They have played great. They've been awesome at the end of games. But I think that North Carolina matches up well with them. I think the talent level, there's very little difference, in my opinion, in the talent level. And I think people have now gotten to the point where they've overvalued Duke and they start it's destiny and all this stuff. I don't believe in destiny. I believe in just player versus player, coach versus coach. And look, I think Coach K has done a wonderful job. His best thing as a coach has always been managing situations. He's great at feeling the game, and he's been wonderful at that during this tournament. But this game is going to be so fascinating. But yeah, I do like North Carolina, and I just think at the price, they're the longest odds of the 4 teams to win it. So I think I'm a value guy. If you're into gambling, I think they're the best value to win this thing. Yeah, most likely Kansas will beat Villanova. It's not like I don't give Villanova a chance, because I do. I think they do have a chance. But yeah, I actually like North Carolina to win it.
Well, I think I agree with you. They're playing as good as anybody. They got Leaky Black. Great defender. He might be the best defender in the country.
Yeah, no, he's a great defender. They got an outside score. And Baycott is just as good as any big player in the country. It's interesting. I used to watch games like November, December, and spend a
Mhm.
lot of time with them. I don't watch many games then anymore, except like for a team I'm with or covering or something, because these teams evolve so much.
Yeah.
And especially now with the transfer portal, like I saw Miami and Penn State play in early December. If you said to me Miami's going to be in the Elite Eight, no chance.
Mhm.
Jim Larinaga made a great point. He says, look, I didn't even know what I had in December because he had all these new players. So yeah, you got to evaluate the sport and really start watching teams late February, maybe mid to late February. Then you get a sense of what they're going to look like in March.
I wanted to ask you about that real quick before we get in NBA. The transfer portal. Are you a fan of that? Do you think that's, I mean, I look at it as it must be so hard now for a coach to recruit long-term, knowing and how he handles a guy who's maybe a freshman who says, oh, I don't want to get him upset because now he's gone,
Yep. Yeah. Look, I'm a fan of players getting similar rights to coaches, right?
Mhm.
Coaches can go, why do players have to get penalized? They can't go to their own conference.
Mhm.
They have to sit out a year. I never liked any of that. But maybe there's some kind of a happy medium because right now it's basically free agency.
Yeah.
Players are getting re-recruited. There was actually a coach I was told by a friend of mine who writes for The Athletic. I won't mention the coach's name, but he stopped letting his players go in handshake lines, not because he thought there was going to be a fight. He thought the other coaches might recruit one of them in the handshake line. So, yeah, that's how crazy it's getting that like an average of 4 or 5 new players on every team. I think there's some unintended consequences.
Mhm.
I don't particularly know what the answer is, but yeah, if you're a coach right now trying to put together a team and hope that it's going to stay together for 4 or 5 years.
Mhm.
Only Villanova's one. They're the only one that can make that happen anymore, right?
Yeah.
People are they're coming and going everywhere. It's just chaos.
Yeah, I think the thing with Villanova that it must be an advantage for Jay is it's a school where when you recruit the kid, he's probably staying longer
Yes.
than, unlike Calipari, who it's all
Right.
NBA driven. He
Yep.
wants a year and out. Oh, I'm not happy if you stay 2 years or whatever. So I think that may be an advantage Jay has. But
Yeah, and look what Jay did. He had 2 fifth-year guys in Samuels and Gillespie who obviously could have gone to play anywhere.
Mhm.
They never thought about playing
I
anywhere,
didn't
but
even think
they'd
about
always
it.
play.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just a question of whether they were going to play the 5th year. It was a question of where.
Right. Okay. So real quick on the Sixers, I'd love to hear I'm sure, I don't know how much you follow them. I know you're still in the area, but the way this Ben Simmons thing kind of played out, I'll give you my take real quick, and then I'd be interested to hear kind of what you thought. So, one criticism I've had, and it's probably been something that maybe coming from Philadelphia, I definitely don't just go with the crowd of Sixers. I try to look at it like, well, hold on, what are we talking about here? Let's like let our eyes trust, let's trust our eyes. And this is a franchise that hasn't won anything since 1983, and I don't just want to go with them. But so the Ben Simmons thing was interesting, and I don't know how much you saw him at LSU. I assume you were covering college at the time, so I'm sure you heard, how much of a prospect he was. But I was just so surprised that, look, they draft this guy. He couldn't shoot when they drafted him, right?
Yep.
He doesn't make the tournament, and which I always kind of sets off a red flag for me. This guy's like a guy that's going to change your franchise. He's at LSU. He couldn't even get in, whatever. He comes, right? Everyone, if you remember back in the Philly sports scene, it was, this guy could be the next Magic Johnson. Yeah. This guy's LeBron without a jump shot. I mean, high praise, right? Oh,
for sure.
Yep. They let him sit. He sits out the first year with the foot injury. He's getting coddled. I mean, that's what they do now.
Yep.
He makes tons of money without ever having to develop a jump shot. If you remember poor Brett Brown, when he was going through that, I remember he came out in the media and said, look, I just want Ben to shoot like 2 threes a night. Totally disregards Brett Brown, doesn't want to listen, right? So he has this style of play that everybody knows. But then it becomes obvious that in that Atlanta series, it really became glaring that, oh, this is a huge problem, which if you were paying attention for a few years in that Toronto series, it was a problem, a few of those Celtics series.
Yep.
And then it becomes all on him. And I'm no fan of him. I don't think he's got a winning mentality. He doesn't, he's very, I guess his ego and whatever. But is there any blame on the Sixers? I mean, to you, is it just all him, or is it, well, they kind of mismanaged this thing? Maybe year one, you go, Ben, look, you got to develop a jump shot here, or we're not going to be able to sign you to $100-something million contract.
Right. Yeah. I mean, look, not being really close to the situation, it's hard for me to ascribe exact percentages of blame, but yeah, clearly he's got a management team around him that's looking to maximize his value. I mean, that's their job, but a lot of times a player's value is maximized at the expense of the team's success. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of what happened here, because there were always parts of his game that were going to be problematic when you get into the playoffs and every little thing you do is scouted. He's a sensational passer. He's an unusual player in that he's 6'11" with those kind of ball skills. Great rebounder. Not a great finisher for a guy as big as he is. He misses a lot of easy shots, and I think that's just because he's off balance a lot. I sometimes wonder if he shouldn't shoot with his right hand more than his left. Yeah. And the fact that he never would, whatever those things they would show us every summer.
Yeah, the YMCA videos with nobody
jump
there.
Shot.
Like, what are we doing?
I don't care how many times you practice your jump shot. If you're practicing it wrong, incorrectly,
right,
the results are still going to be bad. And then unfortunately, in the Atlanta series, it became a psychological problem with the free throws. He was never that bad, but it just became, and he wasn't the only player that was bad in that series. I mean, Embiid was brutal in the last game.
Huge turnover. Yeah.
But yeah, you knew after the way it ended, he couldn't come back. I mean, you're too young for this, but Mitch Williams gives up the home run to Joe Carter. He wasn't going to be able to come back to Philly. It wasn't really fair to him because he actually had a really good year, but it's just you can't come back. So you knew Simmons wasn't going to be able to come back. We all said it at that moment, but clearly management didn't understand the ramifications because they just dawdled, well, we'll call Ben and he'll be fine. He was never going to come back. That was clear. First of all, you couldn't have brought him back because the fans would have just crushed him, which is brutal enough. He didn't want to be here, and they should have recognized that first and maybe maximized his value and gotten something for him earlier and not have this thing go on for months and months. But yeah, I don't know what's going to happen to him if he ever plays for the Nets. Is it this year? Is it some other year? Is he ever going to do the work to become – look, the great players, I mean, the Kobe Bryants of the world, Giannis, these guys, they're already great and they work to become legends. Those are the guys that do that. LeBron. Embiid's heading that way, but I still have some questions about him too. As talented as he is. But those are the guys that win the championships. I don't see Simmons being all that interested in it at the moment. Will he get interested? Not sure. It's unfortunate it didn't work out here, but it wasn't going to work out here. And we'll see if this Harden thing works in the short and or long run.
Yeah, you just hit on a lot of things that I've been talking about. I want to unpack a few things there. One is I heard Larry Brown, I think it was his second year, he was on one of the radio shows with Anthony Gargano. And Anthony Gargano is a big Ben Simmons. He's going to win multiple championships. And I remember thinking, okay. And Larry Brown said to him, Anthony, this guy is not a point guard in the half court in the NBA. He can play in transition.
Right. Yep.
But if you think this guy's in the half court a point guard, when that game slows down, you're a moron. This guy, he's a point guard that does not shoot. Right. So he doesn't have a position in the half court. And you saw that exposed in games where he would hide in the corner. I mean, he's your ball handler and he's hiding. Jimmy Butler's got to handle the ball, right? Yep. So to me, it was just, Dick, it was so, if you were being objective early on, it was like, I don't know. I don't see this. But so much of the Philly media was no. And they kept going until about last year. Do you think that, I'm curious your opinion on, because you covered so many of these things. Is it hard to trust your eyes when everyone else around you, who even if you respect, is like, no,
sure.
Because it seems like so many times that the emotions get involved and you just go with the narrative. And it's like,
right.
I know that Anthony Gargano knows he's watching basketball.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah. No, I trust my eyes. I don't listen to the crowd. I learned that really early on. Look, Ben Simmons and LB is one of the sharpest guys ever.
Yeah.
Look, Larry Brown says you're not a half court point guard. You're not.
Yeah, right.
It's just the reality. And what's the NBA? It's all these ball screens, pick and rolls.
Mhm.
Well, there's no good pick and roll if the guy with the ball can't shoot, right? So you've eliminated a lot of that. Remember the good Sixers teams, they would run with Redick and Embiid
Mhm.
or Jimmy Butler.
That was the best team, I think, of this.
Yeah, they were very good. They just, they were in a dead heat with Kawhi doesn't hit that. I don't know how many times the ball bounces on the rim. They're in overtime in Game 7. So yeah, that was obvious to me, and I never look. I have friends in the media. I have other people, some of whom I respect, some of whom I really don't, because I just don't think they know the game.
Yeah,
I think they know writing, but it's different to know the sport itself. Yeah, they just went along. Hey, he was highly touted. He was the number 1 pick. Everybody's always said he was great, so therefore he must be great. Now it doesn't work that way.
Well, it was like Markelle Fultz. I mean, I remember hearing guys. I remember Tim Legler calling in the radio, and they're like, "This guy's the perfect fit for." And I'm thinking, how many Philly sports guys are watching Washington games?
None.
But they're all saying the same. But they're all saying the same thing, and I'm thinking, I don't know. I don't know yes or no. But Dick, and I'm not just playing results. I mean, 5 minutes of like just looking at that guy and listening to that guy and seeing how he responds to negative. I'm like, this guy, all you would have to do is have dinner with this guy.
Yeah, that was just one of the biggest boondoggles ever. It was like, and that was strictly groupthink. Everybody just all of a sudden decided Mark Fultz was the guy. And I watched Washington, and there were a couple of red flags. One is he was like a sub 65% free throw shooter. That's a problem.
Yeah.
And second, when you just watched his shot, it looked bad. Yeah. I mean, we all know what a good jump shot looks like. I mean, not everybody's Stephen Curry, but you know the difference between a good one and a bad one. You could watch Paige Beckers for UConn. She has a perfect jump shot.
Yeah, I know.
There are people that have it and they don't. And Fultz was always herky-jerky, never really liked the looks of it. But that's what you have scouts for. What are you doing? But the Sixers got caught up, like a lot of other people. All the scouts said he's the best guy. All right, well, you got to take the best guy. Well, he wasn't the best guy. He wasn't even close to the best guy.
Not even
it
close.
was just it was just a total.
De'Aaron Fox. I mean, you look at that draft, there was so many. And to move up 2 spots, I mean, I always say you don't move up from 3 to 1 unless LeBron James is sitting there, right?
Correct.
And you can't miss.
And you miss on it's going to be a 12-time All-Star and Jason Tatum.
Yeah.
For your biggest rival.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, here's a guy who can get 50 any night of the week.
How much, and you hit on this, and I actually had this written down to talk to you about, because I talk about this all the time. And this was actually one of the things when I started this podcast that I brought up on certain guys like Carson Wentz. I talked about this a lot, and you hit on it, and I never really heard anyone hit on this. I always say, at this level, when you get to the pros, everybody's good, right? Like you can't get to the pros without talent. Right. So then the next question would be, well, what makes them great? And that's not just pure talent, right? Because if you look at a guy like Tom Brady, is he more talented than Aaron Rodgers and something? Probably not naturally, right? Mm-hmm. So I always say what makes them great and what separates them is not loving to win, because everyone loves that, but hating to lose, where they get bothered to a point. I mean, you look at Kobe when he would lose. You look at Brady when he loses. Some of these great, Jordan. It eats at them more than they love winning. And so sometimes when I look at a guy, and I'm nobody, I'm not a scout or anything, but I'll look at a guy and I'll say, hey, he's a great talent. And Carson Wentz was one of these guys. Early on, I said he's a great talent, but I want to see him when he's down 10. I want to see him when he loses a tough game. How's he act like tomorrow? Or how's he act during the game? And he was one guy I was like, and Simmons, similar, because I remember after the Atlanta game, Game 7, D. Lynam was asking him some tough questions. Yep. And she said, Ben, what about this on offense? What about the free throw shooting? Why'd you give up the layup? And immediately, instead of like, look, I got to be better, it was, didn't you see how good I was on defense? Hold on, give me the stat sheet. How many rebounds did I? It's like, hold on. Are you bothered by? And so I'm just curious your opinion on that, because as we transition to the Sixers now, one thing that has always been a problem with me with this James Harden guy, as talented as he is, you watch they lose by 29 to the Nets and he's out at a party. with a bunch of rappers after the game. And I'm thinking, that's fine. You live your life. I don't want to make too much of it. But is that the guy that's going to get you over the hump? You know, does he care about losing enough? What kind of message is that to Maxey and some of these guys about what it takes to win? And I just think you can evaluate and be right a lot of times when you just look at that one little difference. And I'm curious to hear what you hit on it a little bit, but.
Yeah, no, your point on Harden's a good one. Look, what separates the great from the legends is the parts we don't see, right? What are they doing when nobody's watching, right? What happens if LeBron finishes his season in June? What's he doing in July, August, and September? You know he's working. You know Tom Brady's out there doing things that other people are not willing to do to be great or stay great. And only the top 0.001% of anybody really at anything are willing to do that. I mean, if you think of the all-time greats in sports, Tiger Woods was one of them in our time, right? He was not only the most talented guy, he outworked everybody. He did things nobody had ever done before. He got in incredible physical shape. I mean, golfers,
drinking beer.
Michael Jordan was like that. And it's only those kinds of players, and there's not very many of them, especially now when the money is so gigantic. It's very easy to get comfortable. And James Harden looks to me like he's gotten comfortable. He's had a great career. He's going to the Hall of Fame. He's put up some insane numbers.
Super
He's
talented.
put on some really good teams that were not his fault, but were never quite good enough. It wasn't like, oh, he was on the best team and they lost. But he looks to me like a guy now. He's starting to look older. You wonder if he's taken as good a care of his body as he once was. And I think the Philadelphia fans who were going nuts when the trade was made, and I get it, because you were basically trading Seth Curry and Andre Drummond for James Harden. You make that trade, right? Because Simmons wasn't going to play. So anybody's making that trade. I get it. But I think they're going to be disappointed in the end, because I just don't think, I don't know if A, their mentality that you're talking about is there, and B, I'm not sure physically he's capable of doing the things he was capable of doing even 3 years ago. When I watch him play, and he's never been a good defender. And if you just try to X and O the Sixers into the playoffs, they're going to have the worst perimeter defense of anybody. I mean, Maxey, as fun as he is to watch, he can't guard a mannequin. He's terrible. So that's a real problem when you have Harden and Maxey. And in a 7-game playoff series with these great coaches and the scouting that they do, they're going to get exposed. And then it's all going to be on the big man, who's phenomenal. He's crazy. But in a 7-game series, he starts to rely more and more on jump shots. And that becomes a problem. I just think they have too many cracks to get there. I hope I'm wrong. I'd love to see him have a great run, be fun for the city. I don't see it.
Well, I always say, sometimes I don't know what your thought was on this whole process that started 10 years ago. It's funny. I met Doug Collins at a high school. His son-in-law coached at Carroll, and I met him when this thing started.
It
was funny. I sat with him all game, and he was great. And I said, Doug, what do you, he goes, I can't be a part of I can't walk around the city winning 5 games a year. It's not in my, and you watch Brett Brown, he went from brown hair to gray hair to white hair. Right. And I just thought, you're selling everyone on losing on purpose. And I understand why, because you need to, whatever. And then you're going to expect them to win. And I don't know. I agree with you. I see a James Harden that's lost a step for sure. If you watched him when he won MVP 4 years ago, he's not the same player. And I think I always had a respect for the Philadelphia fans, because they're very passionate, but sometimes I do get in these things with them where I say they get very knee jerk. We have James Harden, and I'm curious your opinion on, is that because maybe they just haven't had a ton of great players that have come through, or are they not watching because I watched Game 7 last year, Brooklyn Nets and Milwaukee. I'm thinking, James Harden shot 1 for 13 from 3. This isn't a guy that I wasn't jumping up and down. I agree with you. You needed him. But this isn't a guy that he's never won a championship. All of a sudden at 33, he's going to, with Embiid, maybe, I don't know. I look at a team that their transition defense is poor. They have no bench. Who's their backup center? I don't love the coach. I think you get him in tight spots, and I don't know, he does some weird things. So to you, I don't know what it is. I'd be curious to hear your opinion on the fan. Like, and then I hear it even from, I don't know if it's because these radio guys in Philly are from Philly, so they then push it. And it's like, it's like, let's get some adults in the room and just talk about what are we doing? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, it's funny. There was this is a little before your time, but Chris Webber was at the back end of his career, and he was a great player. And he came to the Sixers.
Yep.
And we said, "Oh, we got Chris Webber." I said, "No, you actually don't," because I stayed up and watched the late games out on the West Coast.
Yeah, you're watching games. Yeah.
Yeah, he just wasn't the same guy anymore. A good player, but not the all-star. So yeah, Harden is a name, and most fans, that's what they are. They're fans. They're not analyzing tape. They're not looking at the intricacies of the game. And again, he's had a great career. People have seen him do things to their team, but most fans they know their team. They don't know the rest of the league. It's hard. And I think your point about poor Brett Brown and the whole process thing. And I was never a fan of it. When anything is based on you're getting the correct ping pong balls in the right season, that's not a plan to me. That's you're playing the lottery and hoping that you hit it. And I always thought that thing was kind of a fraud being perpetrated upon the public.
I agree. And
having done a lot of sports radio in this town, everybody loves the fantasy leagues and all that stuff. And they all want to trade everybody for, I remember one day I said that I picked 3 random bad Sixers. And I said, yeah, I hear tomorrow they're going to trade those 3 guys for Shaq. And everybody went crazy. It was just like a joke, right? That's obviously not going to happen, but that's how the fans think. And they think, all right, well, we're just eventually going to put all these players on it. It'll all work out. Well, it doesn't work that way either. So yeah, I feel bad for the fans because I think they've been sold something that doesn't exist. And then of course they've made some dreadful draft choices in the middle of this. To do this right, you couldn't miss much, and they've missed a lot. That's a problem. And I'm with you on Doc. I think Doc back with the Celtics was on it. To me, Doc Rivers looks like a guy now who's had a lot of success, probably going to be in the Hall of Fame, probably deservedly so. I just don't think he's as locked into this as he once was. I think the same thing of Daryl Morey. He had a lot of success in Houston. I think the only thing he knows now is to go back what worked for him there.
That's the Harden thing too.
Let's get James Harden. I just think the fans, they're more name guys. I mean, Doc, in that 7-game series against Atlanta, that was a coaching mismatch. I
thought it was horrible.
I mean, even in Game 7, when they're putting Kevin Huerter, poor Seth Curry is trying to guard Kevin Huerter, and they just posted him up in his lane one time after another, and they never changed. They never came to help. I'm screaming at the TV. I said, give this poor kid some help.
Yeah.
And that was just bad. And Atlanta just kept exposing the mismatch. I mean, Kevin Huerter's a good player, but he's not supposed to be going off.
He's going off. Yeah. Well, Dick,
even to the point,
go ahead.
Even to the point in that series, Gallinari is another guy. He can't guard anybody, right? But what they could do was, he's a really good offensive player. They put him on the floor and said, guard Simmons. It's like not guarding anybody. And that was coaching by Atlanta, which the Sixers just weren't incapable of doing.
Yeah, I mean, how many you've been around forever? I mean, how many NBA teams lose Game 5 and 7 at home?
Impossible.
Especially as the one seed.
Lose a couple of gigantic leads.
Yeah, it's unheard of.
I think also there's something about the general makeup of this group, and this is a little hard to quantify why no lead is ever safe with them. They just have these periods where they just stop playing, and I think typically that's when your perimeter defense is bad because guys can just get places. So yeah, I think it's all going to be on. Embiid's going to have to be beyond great for them to advance very far in the playoffs. Now they may get a series in the first round, say they get Cleveland or somebody like that, a series they can win. But anything beyond the first round, and that's the other thing. People, I don't know they know this.
They haven't been out of the second round.
Things started. They've never gotten out of the second round.
I say it all the time. I say since Doug Collins went to 7 games with the Celtics with Drew Holiday,
Yep.
They've never got out of the second round. And I'll say that to
Right.
these process guys, and it's almost like there's a brain malfunction goes. It's like,
Yeah.
wait, what? It's like they've never gotten past that. So is that
No,
a success?
Yeah, I don't, to me, if you're not in winning the championship or at least playing for it or looking like you have a team good enough to do it. Remember the first year when they beat Miami in the first round of the playoffs and they had Boston?
Yeah.
And the whole city's going, oh, this will be easy.
No
Boston,
Kyrie.
yeah, Boston just killed them. I mean, just
Yeah.
ran them out.
I remember radio guys say, "Oh, this will be over in 5," and I'm thinking,
Yeah, and Brad Stevens, they exposed, I'm losing track of the names, but the 2 Euro guys who couldn't guard anybody, they totally exposed them as bad defenders.
Yeah, the former Spur, Bellinelli, I think. And
Bellinelli was just awful. He makes Gallinari look like a good comparison. So, yeah, I mean, they just were running ISOs. Brad Stevens is one of the sharpest guys at exposing mismatches in the sport. And at first quarter of the first game, I said, this series is over. They got no chance. I mean, it was just obvious. But yet the city had been brainwashed into thinking that it was the opposite.
I see it so much now, Dick. I see it. There's so many times where I feel like I'm crazy. I'm like, I don't see that. And I'm up late. I'm watching games. I'm like, to me, that's not as obvious as you think. And I think a lot of people then get upset with me, like, oh, you hate them. And I'm like, I'm not hating anybody. I want them to win. I'm just
saying what you say. I actually have a term for it. It's a term I coined in horse racing, where there's a horse who's in a race who has a reputation that's a lot bigger than the reality.
Mm-hmm.
I call it RIP, reputation-induced phenomenon. It really happens in sports. And in horse racing, it's great because you can bet against those horses.
Yeah.
Same thing happens with teams. Teams that are overvalued, that the public jumps on. It's a great time to go the other way if you're into that kind of thing.
What do you see? Last thing on the Sixers, what do you see with Embiid? You mentioned earlier you're not completely sold. Real quick, I'll tell you, I think one thing that will help him, they don't play back-to-backs anymore in the postseason. So that helps. Yep. But the thing I worry about, super talent, generational talent, maybe a big guy that can shoot and handle and move around like him. But I question the toughness. I question the stamina. If he has to go a couple game sevens deep into the playoffs, which he's never done. If you remember that Toronto series, I remember he was a game time decision every game. And I'm thinking Brett Brown's got to deal with this. And game 5, he has a great game 4. I always laugh. Remember he was doing like the airplanes and stuff. He's like, game 5, he texts Brett Brown like early in the morning that he had gas pains. And I'm thinking, what is going on? And Brett Brown's got to deal with this.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, and he definitely seems like he's matured a little. It seems like he's starting to figure it out. But to your point, if you have to rely on Joel Embiid to take you to a final in a league that has become, it's not completely guard oriented, but you almost need that. And I think that's why maybe they needed Harden. I don't know if they get it. That Celtics team's as hot as anybody. If they have to run into that Brooklyn team with Kyrie playing home games, they have their own problems. But I don't know. Can Joel Embiid take you to a final? And I'm just curious, what you see, maybe some of the weaknesses of him.
Yeah, again, this is something I hope I'm wrong about, but I don't see it. I do think he's gotten a lot better. I think he has grown up in a lot of ways. He's not as demonstrative as he used to be. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's older. He doesn't need all that stuff. And a lot of he was having that great success, and he hadn't played basketball that long. It's understandable. He's making a lot of money, and the fans love him, and I love him because I like how he's willing to say things.
Yeah,
he clearly enjoys himself, and he is an incredible talent. The footwork, the ball skills, the fact that he's a big man. He probably shoots more threes than he should, although I'm a big 3 guy. Mm-hmm. But the fact that you can count on him to make free throws, he's got to be one of the great big man free throw shooters in history.
Yeah, great touch.
I don't know where he ranks. If you say he's among the 10 best centers in history, which I think you can say, I got to think he's the best free throw shooter of all of them. Mm-hmm. Abdul-Jabbar was good, not this good. Hakeem was good, not this good. And obviously a lot of big men were just bad. But that's important because he gets fouled so much. And I think he's become a little better at different facets. He's become a better passer. He sees the game a little better. Before you could double team him and trap him and force him into turnovers. But I still think there's a little bit missing there, whether it's a stamina thing whether it's a settling late in games for jump shots,
Yeah.
rather than just get in there and dunk on somebody because he just doesn't have the stamina to do it. I think all those things are still to be questioned at this point until he actually does it. And I also still do not think he has the right supporting cast
Yeah.
to get him there. He doesn't, like the killers in their division. Jason Tatum's a killer, stone cold. Kevin Durant is one of those guys. When I was mentioning the great players with the natural talent who spend all summer getting greater, he's one of them. He's a legend. They don't win the Olympics without Kevin Durant. I mean, they gave him the ball every big play.
Yeah.
He almost got the Nets on what a toe
by himself. Yeah.
where he knocks the Bucks out last year. And to try to beat him in a playoff series, good luck. Giannis, same thing. He's already proved. These guys have proven that they can get there. He really just hasn't yet.
Yeah, and until he does, I don't know that you can. I think that's the one thing that's always going to hold him back until he gets over that hump. I do question sometimes when I watch him when they're losing late in the fourth quarter. Like you said, he will settle for bad shots. He doesn't seem like he wants to work to have to find position in the post. And, when you're up 10, things get a little bit easier. But
and you know what? That can change. It's interesting. People don't remember this now, but early in his career, and keep in mind he came right out of high school, LeBron was a little like that. LeBron had some horrible playoff games with Cleveland, and then even Miami.
Yeah.
I mean, just brutal. I mean, they never in a million years should have lost to Dallas.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, he finally won his first championship. And then he became the player you now watch, where he's a stone cold killer at the end of games. And I mean, he's great, but it took a while. And I think in his case, it was just because he was so young and the hype was so insane when he came into the. And it's very rare that you get a guy hyped at that young age who turns out to be even better than the hype, because LeBron has. I think you can now make the case that he's the greatest to ever play the game. I get the case for Michael Jordan and Wilt and others, but the fact that whatever team he goes to is in the finals and he's going to have all the records by the time it's over, he's going to have to be in the conversation as the best.
He's definitely in the conversation. I think the one thing, the era, I always look at eras, and I didn't watch a ton, probably as much as you back in the 80s and 90s. The one thing that has changed, you can't touch anybody. There's no hand checks.
That's right. Yep.
You're not draped all over people. If you look at these guys now, I always say Markelle Fultz got a triple double in a game. I mean, think about it. It's wide open. They're jacking threes. Everybody's getting rebounds. So I wonder, if you remember, and LeBron, I mean, here's the thing about LeBron. He was gifted with an unbelievable body. And he kept it healthy. The guy plays every night. Well, not as much this year, but when he was going on those runs. But the East, when he was racking up those finals in the East, I don't know if that was the same as when maybe Jordan was on the Bulls going against those Pistons teams and some of those other. But you're right. I mean, he's top. You can make the argument for sure.
He's up there. And to your point, when Jordan was playing, those were games won 88 to 84.
Right.
And he'd still have 35.
Yeah.
And they were mugging him, beating the hell out of him. And he was still that good. Jordan is the greatest killer / finisher I've ever seen in sports. I mean, Tiger Woods would be up there with him. Maybe Brady. Those three to me would just be guys that the bigger the moment, the better they perform.
Kobe.
Kobe was not, to me, he wouldn't be up in that group. Really good, but I think he was more wanting to be able to do that.
Yeah.
He didn't have that many great moments at ends of games, actually, in his career. Phenomenal player, one of the best ever, but not. I mean, how many shots that won playoff games do you remember from Kobe? You can remember a lot from Jordan, a ton, including ones that won championships. Tiger Woods, he's got to make a birdie on the 18th hole. Well, he makes it.
Yeah.
Brady
first down, 3rd and 14.
Yeah, I don't. And there's only maybe a handful of those guys in history.
Last thing on the NBA, it's funny now that, like I told you, I'm in Boston now, and I always have this debate with Celtics fans and Sixers fans. And one of my good buddies in Philly, he's older. He was a diehard Larry Bird fan in Philly.
Yep.
And he always gets into this debate because there's some Philly sports guys that there's one in particular, I won't say who he is. He said that Larry Bird could not play in today's NBA. And this guy kind of lost his mind. And I've heard this debate now back and forth with these Dr. J Sixers guys and all. I'm curious because I know did you cover the 92 Olympic? I know Bird was done.
I did. I was there. I was actually in the gym for the last two games.
Yeah. And he was pretty much shot, right? At that point.
Well, he was hurt. He was hurt. Yeah. His career was just about over at that point.
But I'm sure you saw him a lot. What's your take on, I mean, I haven't seen him, so I don't know, but everything guys I respect that tell me about him, how smart he was, how tough he was, how he thinks the game. These guys today, it's all athletic. They're not even thinking through things. I think that's what makes LeBron so great. He thinks he's so much smarter than everybody. What's your thoughts on that with Bird today? I'm just curious.
Anybody who doesn't think Larry Bird could not play in today's NBA did not see Larry Bird play. So,
I agree.
6'9", and now with the emphasis on the three-point shot, he was a great three-point shooter. He had the legendary moment in the three-point contest where he walked out, never took his warm-ups off, and said, "Which of you guys is going to finish second?" That's how confident and cocky and really good, and he could back it up. One of the 3 or 4 greatest passers in the history of the sport.
Yeah.
Phenomenal passes.
Better passer than LeBron, you think, right?
LeBron's really good. They're in the ballpark, but
yeah.
Bird was ridiculous. And he could post you up, could finish at the rim, and really a brilliant understanding of angles and the geometry of the game. So yeah, is he as athletic as some of the players today? No, but very few players from that era would be. But yeah, Larry Bird
will be just fine
today or any day.
Well, and like we said before about when I said Ben Simmons at LSU doesn't make the tournament. I mean, if you're who's heard of Indiana State?
Correct.
Since he's been there.
Yeah, now think about that. Indiana State Sycamores
yeah.
undefeated to the championship game. And they probably win if they don't run into anybody but Magic Johnson.
Yeah.
In the championship game. Yeah, I mean, that can't happen. I mean, seriously.
Yeah, I figured you would say that, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, he would go on YouTube and check Larry Bird out. You'll see some things.
Yeah, I know they love him up here. I know we've been going a little bit long. A couple quick things from you. One, I just wanted to touch on it because they're starting up next week. Phillies. I know you were with that 08 team. I don't know how much you're tied into the Phillies, but any quick thoughts on this team? A couple additions. This Nick Castellanos, I've loved him for a few years. Really tough. Schwarber looks like Moniak's having a good spring. This Bryce Stott that they love. Didi, we'll see what he does. Any quick thoughts on this team? I like Jerardi and Dombrowski, so I think maybe they'll be in the right direction. But
they look like a slow pitch softball team to me.
Yeah. Just hit home runs.
Right. In the beer league, I think they'd be great. The problem is they're in the same division with the Mets, who have obviously great pitching if their guys stay healthy. It's a big if. They are in with the defending world champs, right? Atlanta's still obviously very good. Yeah. I'm a huge Bryce Harper guy. I mean, he's been everything we could have hoped for. Sure. And now he's got better players around him. So I think they'll score, but are they going to be able to catch the ball? I mean, do they have a good defender on this whole team?
No, that might be the worst defensive team.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be brutal. And when you're a bad defensive team with below average pitching and a dreadful bullpen, I mean, they've had the worst bullpen like in baseball history 2 years in a row. It cost them 2 straight playoff spots, right? Because they couldn't get anybody out at the end of games.
Yeah.
I mean, they're wasting a all-time talent.
It's amazing.
In Bryce Harper. So am I optimistic that they're making the playoffs? Unless some of these new guys are better at pitching than they've been up till now, I don't see it. Hope I'm wrong, because I'd love to see a guy like Bryce Harper get more chances in the postseason, because I think he's one of those big moments guys. He just needs to get in a position where he's playing in a big moment.
Well, I think the core of the problem, when you look at those other teams like Atlanta, we just don't develop any young talent. I mean, that when you have to go through free agency to get everybody,
yes,
instead of just adding free agents. And you look, I mean, I follow baseball, I read as much as I can. There's certain guys I wonder, like, for example, Scott Kingery. Everything I read about Scott Kingery was this kid's a Gold Glove second baseman.
Sure.
He's a ball player. I watched him. I said, this kid's a ball player. He loves to play. And it seems like they moved him all over the field. They give him $23 million before he takes an at bat. Yep. And and by the end, Dick, last year, the beginning of the year, he looked like he never played baseball before.
It's sad. It's sad to watch him.
And
Yeah.
I said, how does this, and it just seems like over and over and over, these guys, Dominic Brown, remember him? It was this guy that was, and then it was like 6 weeks and it was done. And it's why can't they develop these guys? Because until you do that, I just don't see, if you look at Tampa Bay, if you look at Oakland and these teams that stay, Dodgers that stay competitive, they add those free agents to a core like 08, 09 when we were really good.
No, the owner of the team said it really well a year or so ago. He said, look, it's been a problem for this organization forever, right? They just can't get young players. And it's certainly in my time in town, only one time did it happen. And it ended up with this team that won the World Series and played the World Series. They drafted Jimmy Rollins. They drafted Ryan Howard. They drafted Chase Utley, Cole Hamels. All those guys were guys that came up, and then they added the other guys to get them to the finish line. But yeah, they just, it's just, and it doesn't matter. It seems like who's running the operation. And look, to me, that was one of the hardest things imaginable, to draft high school baseball players
and then project it out.
I don't know. I mean, I have no expertise at it. I've watched enough basketball where I feel like I can have an opinion, but I wouldn't know how to do that. And obviously it's very, very difficult when you consider they're not the only teams that miss, but they've especially missed on like young, early round draft guys that just never turned out to be good. And yeah, it's an ongoing problem for the organization. And until they're able to do it, I don't know how you do it. I mean, how does Tampa Bay do it? They have nothing. They have no money. Nobody goes to the games, yet year after year they're in contention because of how they draft and develop players.
I think it's two-part. It's one, knowing what the scouts, knowing what they're watching, right? Because if you look at one point, they had Dominic Brown as a 5-tool player, and I'm thinking he makes a pop-up look difficult.
He might have had zero tools.
Yeah, and I don't have any experience, but I'm thinking, so that's part of it. And then the second part is the development. When you get them, making them better. It seems like a lot of our guys regress. I don't know why that is. I remember when Kingery, because I followed him a lot, I remember reading, because when they brought Kapler in, it was very analytical. And and Kingery said, I remember I read the Daily News one day. He's like, I'm used to just getting up there, trusting my eyes and swinging. They're handing me a sheet before the game of don't swing at this pitch. Swing. It's too much in your head, you know?
Oh yeah. No, clearly they messed up that kid who you can't go from doing what he did in the early part of his career to not doing anything at all without some psychological damage in the middle. I mean, he's not 40 years old.
Right.
Become a physical wreck.
Yeah.
That didn't happen. I do know he was really sick. I believe he had COVID at one point, and I think he had it worse than a lot of people. I think that set him back. But yeah, it's just, you watch him now and he's just a shell of what he was.
Yeah. Couple quick other things, just maybe some like rapid fire things just that were on my mind that I was thinking about. When you look back at that St. Joe's team, because that I'm sure was probably one of your most memorable times, and thinking that this Final Four, was there something when that year started, was there something always magical about that team? Did you kind of see that developing early on, or was it just, wow, they got at the right, we didn't never expected that to happen? What separated them from other teams?
I knew they were going to be really good. It's interesting. The year before they were really, really good. And then Delonte West got hurt at the end of the year. He had a stress fracture. He couldn't play in the Atlantic 10 tournament, or barely played. And then he was kind of no good. They lost to Auburn in overtime in the first round of the tournament. And he was a shell of himself. But they were the number one field goal defense in the country that year. And that was the year, they had the program had turned a corner. The year before, they were supposed to be good and really weren't. They were disappointing. So yeah, I knew they were going to be really good. And then Nelson had tested the draft. He had gone to the pre-draft camp, and then he pulled out literally at the 11th hour. And the first game that year was against Gonzaga in the Garden on a Friday night. And Gonzaga was good. I mean, they were always good. But Nelson was crazy good. West was great. The whole team was great. And I remember I called Phil Martelli the next day. I said, Phil, and I'll never forget this. I just looked at their schedule and I said, you know what? I think you could win every game. That's how because again, you knew they were going to be good. Now there's all these veteran guys back. Pat Carroll, great shooter. Now their big guys were, the best way to describe John Bryan and Dwayne Jones was serviceable guys, but knew their roles. Tyrone Barley, the great sixth man, Jets Dakotas off the bench. And it's such a fun team to watch. They were kind of the blueprint for Jay Wright's teams. They would sometimes play 4 and 5 guards.
Yeah, I remember
They had
that.
23s in a game against Temple. I mean, they were just a powerhouse, and they just kept getting better and better. And really, at the end, they started to tire a little bit at the end of the year.
Mhm.
And I've noticed this with teams that are so guard oriented. Guard minutes are harder than big man minutes, right? Because you're just playing more of the court. And I think they wore down. The fact that they still almost got to the Final Four was a testament to how talented they were. I mean, hell, they had the lead the last 10 seconds of the Elite Eight game. But yeah, they were a great team. For St. Joe's to have guys drafted back to back in the first round of the NBA draft, I mean, that's never going to happen again.
Yeah.
And of course, Nelson had a great 10-year run in Orlando, and I think they would have won the championship in 2009. I think they'd have beaten the Lakers if he hadn't gotten hurt midway through that season. He was in the All-Star game.
I forgot he was on that team. Yeah.
Yeah, and Dwight Howard was in
Yeah.
it. He was great. Rashard Lewis was really good. Turgaloo, JJ Redick. I mean, they were really good. I actually, they ended up losing, I think, in 5 or 6 to the Lakers.
I think it was 5. Yeah.
I think they'd have beaten the Lakers if he had been healthy, which he was not. And then West was off to a really good start to his career, and then he just had a lot of the other emotional problems. It's really kind of a sad story.
Really sad.
Yeah, it is sad.
Seems like he might be getting back a little bit now. That's why I'm shooting in a gym.
Yeah, I hope so. He was. I mean, I still am in touch with Jameer every once in a while. I haven't been in touch with Delonte for a while, but I always enjoyed him because he was a fun guy. He was a great quote because he would say just about anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I felt really bad what's happened to him in his life. For anybody, you would feel, but especially for somebody that you know as well as he did. But yeah, that team they were a throwback. They were really kind of a sign of the times. They shot 1 million threes. They were one of the first teams that really did that. And Nelson was as good a player as anybody's ever had in the city.
Yeah. Are you hearing anything on the LaSalle job? Does it look like Dunphy?
I think he could probably have it if he wants it. I'm not sure where he is at the moment. I know John Gallagher, who did such a good job at Hartford, is a Philly guy.
Well, he was Billy's assistant there, right? At one point.
He was. He was with Billy. He was with Speedy first, and when Speedy left and Billy came, he stayed with Billy, and then went with Fran O'Hanlon. He's done a great job in an impossible situation at Hartford, where he got into the tournament, and then they immediately pulled the rug out for him and say, go Division III. And he's a Philly guy, so I think he'd be a great name for them. But that's the hardest job in the city. It has been for a while. No facilities. The school itself was having problems. But yeah, I think John would be a great choice.
I remember a funny story Billy told me his first year there. He was recruiting guys, and he was saying to himself, how am I going to recruit guys to come to Alany? And he said he would pick them up at the airport or however he got them. And he said, I would hand them a brochure when I knew we were getting into the rough part. So they wouldn't look out the window to see where they were.
It brings up a great point. I'm sure I told Billy this story, but Joe Mahalik, who was the coach at Niagara and Hofstra, was a longtime assistant and player at LaSalle. I said, what's the best way to bring recruits in? He says, by helicopter. It's tough. They made a giant mistake years and years ago. The high school used to be at 20th and Ollie, where the college is. And at one point, there wasn't enough room for both. So the high school moved out to this beautiful campus in Glenside.
Beautiful. Yeah.
That's where the college, that's where the university should be. But they're not, and they're just in a tough spot.
Yeah. I was thinking of this. I guess maybe it's the St. Joe's run. When you look back on the 33 years, what stands out? Like, what's the fondest memory? Maybe a story none of us have heard, maybe something that just makes you laugh, something that you think about. I'm sure there's so many of them, but maybe the one that stands out the most to you.
Well, yeah, I don't know that there's one, but 04 was certainly the best year that I covered. I had as you said, the great St. Joe's team. And then when that ended, and it ended short of where it should have ended. I mean, it would have been great if they'd have made the Final Four. And Connecticut won that year. And Jim Calhoun told Phil Martelli later, he says, man, I'm glad you were out because we had these big guys. I don't know how we were going to guard your little guys, but whatever. And then right after that, I morphed into Smarty Jones.
Yeah, wow.
I had to,
Yeah.
I mean, just you talk about two unbelievable Philly-centric stories that were great stories that just happened to have bad endings, right?
Mhm.
St. Joe's had this great run and then lost right at the end of the game before the Final Four. Smarty Jones to me was fine. He won the Derby, which is a Super Bowl of horse racing. So yeah, those, but probably more than anything, just the relationships with the people
Yeah.
on the road, hanging out. I don't miss a lot of the stuff because I got to do so much. That's the part I miss, just hanging out with people on the road and telling stories. And half of it wasn't true, but that's okay.
Mhm.
We start to embellish what actually happened.
You guys had a great group. You're right about that. Was that just by accident, or was the Daily News one of the hot? If you were a writer, that's kind of one of the cities
We
you wanted
were
to be.
known. Yeah, I think the Boston Globe would be up there, the
Mhm.
Washington Post. I mean, I had some friends at the Globe, and Bob Ryan's a longtime friend,
Yeah.
and John Feinstein at the Post, and guys. I think our sports section was right up there with the top 5 in the country for the whole
Definitely.
time I was there. And it was the writers, and it was also the people behind the writers, the editors, the guys. They supported us. When there was a big story to cover. I'll never forget when Buster Douglas knocks out Tyson in Tokyo, right? And Bernard Fernandez was actually there for us.
Wow.
We actually went to Tokyo to cover that. Well, the next day, Rich Hoffman jumps on a plane to go to Columbus, Ohio to do the Buster Douglas story. He didn't ask anybody. He just went because he knew that was a story we would want.
He was one of my favorite guys to listen to and read for a while. I used to like when he would come on Daily News Live. He was such a thinker, he was so analytical.
Guy. Yeah, a really smart guy, terrific writer. I remember when he got out just about the same time I did. He was actually our sports editor toward the end, and I texted him after the Eagles won the Super Bowl. I said, the only thing I'm missing is a Rich Hoffman column.
Yeah,
I'd love to have been able to read it. But yeah, no, Rich is one of the best. Good friend. I covered the Olympics. It was Rich, me, and Phil Jasner. Phil was covering the Dream Team. Rich and I were covering everything else. But I made sure to get myself to the Dream Team the last 2 games. And interesting, I think I told this story a few times, but after the last game, I went up to Chuck Daly, of course, was the coach. I said, Chuck, he never called a timeout. And he looked at me and he winked and he says, yeah, that was my only goal. He never called it. And why would he? He's always up 40.
Yeah, that's funny you picked up on. I read, I don't know if this is true. I read you said you thought Barkley played the best on that team, huh?
He was the best player of the Dream Team, unquestionably. Jordan, I think, had a lot of late nights, early mornings,
sure.
golf.
Yeah.
Barkley was great. Remember, that's the summer he was traded to Phoenix. We ended up being MVP the next year, and Phoenix was in the finals. Chuck was phenomenal.
Phil must have loved being around those guys. It must have been so much fun.
Yeah, Chuck was of all the players I've been around, and I wasn't around him a lot, but he was one of my favorites. Actually, later that year, I was out with LaSalle in Tucson at a tournament, and we flew into Phoenix, and I went to get the Suns game just to do a story on Chuck. They said, hey, you're out there, get a story on Chuck.
Mm-hmm.
I walked in just like 50 minutes before the game. I don't remember who they were playing. And the rule in the NBA is you can be in the locker room until 45 minutes before game time.
Mm-hmm.
So Tom Chambers, who was in the seat next to Chuck, looks at me and says, you have to leave in 5 minutes. When I walked in, I was kind of late. Chuck looks at him and says, he'll leave when I wanted to leave. I was still in there for the pregame talk from all this. That was Chuck, and he was just telling Philly stories. He says, look at this. He showed me like the jacuzzi. He says, we didn't have any of this at the Spectrum. He was just doing things. He was great.
That's great. When I asked Billy this too, and it'll be this and then one more because I don't want to hold you too much longer. When you look back, for me, a younger guy, I always find it interesting to talk to someone whose career, who's had their career and now the point you're at in life. When you look back to yourself in 1985 when you started, if you could tell yourself one thing, something you've learned over the years, what would it be?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I learned was make sure you get it right. Whatever it is, and I've been saying this for years to everybody that knows me, never make assumptions.
Yeah.
And I learned that pretty early, but I had to make a few mistakes first before I learned it.
Yeah.
And ask the extra question, make the next phone call, because you might think it's one thing, But if you're willing to ask more questions and look under a few more rocks, you might find out it's something else. There's so many big stories, not necessarily that I was involved with, that the media has just gotten wrong through the years
Oh, it's
because
unbelievable.
people just jump to immediate conclusions without actually knowing that there's more to it. And because of the immediacy of newspapers and now the 24/7 news cycle, that's probably harder than ever. But I'm kind of glad I'm not in it now
Yeah.
for that reason, because the demand to get something out there is going to make more people get it wrong than ever before. But yeah, that's the one thing. Don't make
Yeah. I
assumptions.
think, now we live in a time where there's a rush to be first.
Yes.
And it's clickbait where you open your social media feed, there's 100 articles, and then you're then running with that headline to the next person. Did you hear this? Did you see this? It's like, well,
Yeah.
if you read the article, it's not exactly right.
Right. And there are people in positions of power at news organizations, newspapers, TV, wherever, that are basing coverage decisions on what's getting clicked.
Mhm.
And that's the problem. I mean, there's great stories that are being ignored um, because they're not getting as many clicks. But look, if you do a great story, that's why I love a site like The Athletic. I'm thrilled that it's out there, that they've
Yeah, I
given
like
their
that flag.
writers
Mhm.
a chance to write long form stories. And I have a lot of good friends that work there. I just think that it proves that that's still out there. That idea exists if you're willing to get the talented people and give them a chance.
Mhm.
But that they're kind of the exception to the rule right now, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's great advice for everybody, even not in writing and news. I think just taking your time. There's so many things you hear and you get so emotional about. If you take your time and ask questions, I think you can avoid a lot of that. That stress.
What you think it is often isn't what it is at all.
Yeah.
And what you're told it is
That's
often not what
right.
turns out not to be what it is at all.
Yeah. So last thing for you, I can't let you go without a horse question.
Mhm.
May 7th is the Derby, I believe. So we're getting
That's
close.
correct. That is correct.
Uh,
And I haven't been since 2017, but it's been 5 years, so I'm going back this
you're
year.
going. And
Yeah.
are you at parks? Are you doing horse stuff?
Yeah,
Carol?
I still do my weekly horse racing show at
Mhm.
Parks that's on PHL 17 in Philly, 10 a.m. Saturday
Yep.
morning. And I write a horse racing column a week for our website.
Uh-huh.
So I still have that. I don't know if you noticed, I do the Penn State basketball games on the radio. I've
Oh,
done
I
it for
didn't know
18.
that.
Yeah, so I got that going on. Yeah, people say, "How's retirement?" I said, "When I retire, I'll let you."
Yeah. Oh, so our budget. We coached. I was coaching Archbishop Bryan basketball with Joey Zaglinski, who played at Hartford with John
With
Gallagher.
Brock, with my man Brock.
What?
Was Brock there then? Isaiah Brockington?
Isaiah Brockington. Yeah. So that's what I was
Sure.
going to bring up. Was he
Yeah.
was a junior, and it's funny. Isaiah, when he was a freshman, nobody wanted him. He ended up
Yeah.
at Ryan because he was this big.
Yeah.
And now this kid, Penn State to
Great
Iowa
story.
State to maybe now the NBA. So what a
Yeah,
story.
he just declared today that he's going to declare for the draft, and he's such a great kid.
Great kid.
I was thrilled that he had so much success because, look, he was on that really good Penn State team in 1920 that didn't get to play in the NCAAs, and it was really unfortunate because they were really
Yeah,
good.
they were so good. A couple Roman kids on that team.
Yeah, a really good team. And the fact that he not only got to have a great success, first team all Big 12, and
Yeah.
Sweet 16, I was thrilled for him because he's a great kid. His dad obviously was a really good player at Coppin State, and it's just nice for the family that he's had this kind of success.
I think he'll get some looks in the NBA, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of an old school guy, right? He's got the middle game where he shoots the 15-foot jump shot,
Yeah.
but he's become a much better defender, great finisher, phenomenal athlete,
Good
and
body,
a guy.
big.
Yeah,
long.
he's just and just a really first-rate kid. So
Mhm.
yeah, I hope he gets a shot.
Yeah. Okay. So on the horse thing, anything to look for? Any names of anyone you keep an eye on here in the
Yeah.
next month?
Now, there's a lot still to be determined as we're talking. Only one of the major final prep races has been run, the Louisiana Derby.
Mhm.
We got Florida and Arkansas coming up. Then we have Kentucky, California, and New York the following Saturday. But right now, the horse I would like is Epicenter, who just won the Louisiana Derby. It's trained by Steve Asmussen, who has won more races than anybody in the history of the sport. He's closing on 10,000. He's won the Preakness twice, the Belmont once, He's had 4 horses of the year. He's won 8 Breeders' Cup races. There's only one big race he's never won, and it's the one everybody wants to win. He's 0 for 23
Wow.
in the Derby, and this will be the best chance he's ever had.
Is that what do you look for in a horse? Like what do you see in this, for example, in Epicenter? Is it because of the trainer success in the past, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, trainer's part of it, but it's not unlike college basketball. You're watching the development and how are they coming into March. In the case of these young 3-year-olds, it's where are they as they're heading into May? Are they getting better? And Epicenter, each race is part of a puzzle, and each one's getting a little better, and you can see the horse getting a little stronger. And the trainer has mapped out a plan. The problem with the Derby is because it's a 20-horse field, and it's the only one in the sport. I've never liked it. I always said, all right, why don't we have the Super Bowl with 13 players on the side? Stupid. I mean, typical horse race is max of like 12
Right.
or 14. And there's no time to recover. It's only 2 minutes long. It's not. You can't have a bad first quarter.
That's true.
You're out. You're done. You can't be down. You can be down 14 points and come back. In horse racing, if you're down or you're in an uncomfortable situation, you're out of it. So, yeah, you can have the best horse in the loose. So, yeah, it's not easy, but yeah, Epicenter would be my horse today, subject to change, obviously.
Yeah, I'll check in with you as we get closer. Hey, I think that's a great place to stop. I really appreciate it. It's great catching up with you again. It's been a while. And we'll see how the Final Four plays out. And I really appreciate your time. You know, you're a legend. You're a legend in Philly, and it was great to I feel like we covered a lot of cool things. So
yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, save this. I'll show it to people one day. I said I actually used to know something.
Yeah. Well, once we get it out, I'll send it to you. And I saw you have Twitter. We'll tag you in it, and also be great.
Yeah, I appreciate it. No, it's been a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. All right, thanks.
Yes, sir.
I'll see you.
Yes, sir.